What I know to be true is that when your child is diagnosed with dyslexia, it's not a sprint. Some people call it a marathon. I don't like to think of it in those terms. I actually kind of like to use the word triathlon. And the reason why is because triathlon has three very distinct legs to it, with transitions in between each leg. And I think if we frame things in a way that we can understand them and visually imagine them, it's a lot easier to support our children and to help them. And this is sometimes the way a dyslexic thinks too. And so visual imagery is very useful in supporting a child with dyslexia. I'm a mom of three boys. Two of them have dyslexia. The two boys that have dyslexia had significantly different dyslexia. One had severe dyslexia, severe trouble learning to read. The other had dysgraphia, so read quite easily, actually, but really had trouble with output and writing. I'm also an Orton Gillingham tutor and work with children, and I'm a parent coach, helping families navigate this journey. And the reason why I like to talk about the triathlon is because often I meet people at different stages of the journey. Sometimes they discover the dyslexia early, which is always the best. The sooner you can discover dyslexia, the quicker you can get remediation, the quicker you can help your child understand their learning difference and keep their self-esteem. When dyslexia is discovered later, grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, there's all those years before where your child doesn't understand why they're not learning as quickly as the other kids. They know something's not quite right. You know something's not quite right. You're not sure if they're not putting in enough effort, or maybe they're just not meshing with the teacher. But ideally, you want to investigate dyslexia as soon as possible. The minute you feel like your child's not doing as well at school as their siblings or their peers around them, you want to get a screening done right away. And you want to talk to your educators to say, well, maybe there's something more going on. I know they're trying at home. I know we're working with them. I know that they have all the same resources as their siblings, but they're just not progressing the way that their siblings did. That's usually the biggest red flag. If they're not rhyming words the way other kids do, if they don't seem to be able to focus the same way as their siblings or peers, chances are there's something going on. And the sooner we find out, the better. So there's three stages. The first stage is that learning to read stage, sort of kindergarten to grade 3. That's when the primary focus of school is working with those early stages of learning how to read. And these stages are critical. If you discover your child has dyslexia in those stages, this is a prime time to get remediation happening. This is an important time. I know people feel like the school system should be able to support our children, but honestly, when you have a student with a learning difference, it's really difficult for that classroom teacher to be able to spend the quality time that your child needs. Even getting one-on-one pullouts, unless they're getting 1 to 3 hours every single week of 1 hour intensive sessions, they're probably not getting enough time. So this is when you spend this time at early stage helping your child get the reading skills they need to be able to learn. Because from grade 3 to grade 6 or 7, that's when children are reading to learn. They already know how to read, and now they're going to kick it into overdrive and read to learn as much as they can. If your child's at that stage, this is the next stage, so they've transitioned into this learning stage. This is when the accommodations become so critical, because this is the time period where you need to be able to get them all that information as quickly as possible. Time is not on our side when you have a student with dyslexia. They need to be able to get that information any way they can. And ideally, you'd like them to be able to read, but they're not going to be able to read as quickly as they need to. And so this is when other forms of information become so valuable. Audiobooks, videos, any type of multidimensional learning, tactile learning, If you say, for example, your child has to learn about owls or the life cycle of fish, watching a couple videos can be very, very helpful so that when they go to read the book, they already have a good understanding of what they're reading and they can read it in a way that makes sense. If they're spending all that energy trying to read and process the information, chances are you don't have enough time. They don't have enough time. So what the accommodations will do is give you support, technical support, whether it's speech to text, text to speech, scribes in the classroom. You're wanting to get as much of that information out of that bright, capable young person's mind onto paper, allowing them to do projects that aren't all writing, that maybe it's a video project. Maybe they can get the hand in the information through video. As long as they're showing mastery in the subject and learning, it shouldn't matter how they're delivering the information. And that goes the same for when you're helping with their accommodations. You need them to get the information. So this period of time, this is the second stage, I call it, is when you're helping your child understand how they learn. They've moved, they're a little bit older, maybe they're 9, they're 10, they're 11. You can have very frank discussions with how much work they're going to have to do to keep up with their peers. It's pretty consistent in the information about dyslexia. Your student's going to have to work 4 times harder than a typical student in order to achieve the same thing. That's just the way it is. And the sooner we talk to our young learners about this process, build in discipline, help them with structure, help them at home to be able to be organized. This is a critical time to build all these really important skills and help your child to advocate for themselves. Because once they hit high school, this is the next leg of the triathlon, is once they hit high school, the whole game changes. Because now instead of having one educator, they have multiple educators with multiple classes in different rooms. And so it can be incredibly overwhelming. One thing that I see happens is in the second stage of the dyslexia triathlon, if you want to call it, people let go of their accommodations because they say, oh, my student's doing well, my child's doing, they don't need that IEP anymore. I don't want them to have an IEP. They don't need accommodations. They should toughen up. They'll be fine on their own. No, do not do that. That can be one of the most difficult mistakes you make because it's sometimes not as easy to get those accommodations back. And trust me, as a parent with 2 dyslexic students who went through high school and now are in post-secondary education, high school is a total game changer. If you do a triathlon at all, you'll know that the last leg, the run, is the most difficult. It really knocks the crap out of you because that is when all the doors will either open or close. There's so much going on in high school with the academics, the social, the interacting with their peers. It's really critical at that stage to help your child understand that they're responsible for their learning. They're going to have to work very hard, and that if they keep the doors open, if we help them, if they work with their educators to build in their accommodations so they can be successful, then they can have all the doors open after high school. They can go to whatever trade school, college, or university they want. They can do what they want to do, but they're going to have to put in the work. There's no way around it. And they're going to have to build in some organizational structure to keep on top of everything. Dyslexics can tend to be very visual. So having charts around or having whiteboards that they can write their schedule on, something that they can see easily. Often kids these days, high school kids, want to have everything on their phones. It's too small. The printing is too hard. They need to have good visuals to help them stay organized. My point about this last stage is if we do the work in middle school, to help them understand how they learn, to help them understand what accommodations are going to be helpful, to help them communicate their accommodations, to help them request/demand their accommodations. Then they'll have those skills built in so that by the time they get to high school, they know how to communicate their learning style. They know how to ask for accommodation. And really the biggest accommodation dyslexics usually need. I mean, there's lots in younger grades, but by the time they get to high school, the number one thing they're looking for is time, extra time. So if we can make sure that our students have extra time in the learning resource rooms so that they have a quiet place to write their exams, and that they get a little extra time so they can read, really understand what they're reading and absorb it without the stress of the time, then they can help, we keep the doors open. Because once they start applying to colleges or trade schools or universities, at that stage, the universities and colleges expect them to be on their own. They're going to be dealing with them as students and as young learners, as adults, and the people that will be able to work with them, the students that do best are the ones that can communicate their accommodation. So if I go back to the stages of the academic journey, I would say the first stage is the remedial reading, really, really putting your time and energy into getting your child to be able to be a comfortable, fluid reader in those early stages and discovering dyslexia as early as possible. The next stage is helping them get the information as quickly as possible, whether it's through audio or visual, using colors, anything that will help them remember and retain the information, and help them at this stage to learn their accommodations so they can speak to their accommodations on their own. And the last stage is them owning their education, owning their accommodation, being a self-advocate for their learning, and making sure that it's important to them and it's important to their future. So if they know all their accommodations and they make sure they use them, then they can move on to whatever they want to do with the rest of their life. And in college, having those skills, having that executive functioning skills of being organized, of understanding how you learn, giving yourself enough time, prepping yourself ahead, will make a huge difference to the learning outcomes for your children.